We'll now look at the first part of testing. The first part of testing is list-based testing. The principle behind list-based testing is that it's an entirely open system. In other words, you can take existing lists, create new lists of your own, or duplicate existing lists and then share them with other BioCoherence users. What is a list? A list, for example, is aromatic herbs. So when I open a list, since I'm already in a report with a record available, it will evaluate each of the entries and prioritize them. Right now, I've got herbs that are 46% compatible with this record, then I've got others at 22%, 16%, and so on. If we look at the list of essential oils, I have this essential oil which is 85% interesting, then I have another series which is between 30 and 40%. You can see that the background colors are different. When it's on a green background, it's very relevant. Here, there's a lot of energy. At 40%, we're on another series. Between 20% and 30%, we're on purple. Around 0%, we're on gray. And when we're completely negative, we're on red. So that's a pre-assessment, which, depending on what we've parameterized for each of these inputs, gives us directly relevant results. But then, the second part is the live test. You're going to pick out this whole one, for example, and you're going to say to yourself, because your expertise tells you to, this one. It doesn't seem to be consistent with the recording we made here. But I'd still like to know what we're answering. So that's it. We've chosen 8 entries here. And now we're going to do the individual tests. When we do the individual tests, we need to connect to the sensor. I connect to the sensor. It will do a calibration. And then it will launch the 8 tests, one after the other, sending information to the screen, or audio, or video, or photos, or things like that to the person. So it's important that the person sees the screen and sees what's happening at the moment. And for each of these questions, it will evaluate the body's response according to the information being sent. So if we're testing audio frequencies, obviously the person has to hear the audio frequencies. If we're testing elements like that, people need to see what we're testing. So it can be displayed on another screen nearby, for example. And at the end of the test hill, you see it makes different piles of cards up there with things that are good or things that are not good. We'll test the last one, and at the end of the test, he'll reclassify it for us. And it'll tell us here, it'll redisplay the information saying whether the test was inconclusive, or whether the test was good for the person, or whether the test was mixed. So it's a bit like a kinesiology test, except that in this case it's the heart that's most important. Except that in this case it's the heart and the entire organism that respond systematically when presented with information. The idea when you do a test is to put as much information as possible on it. So it would be good, for example, for essential oils to have photos, to have things like that. Information about the systems on which they act. And the more information we present, the more the person will have an intuitive response to it, which will be able to measure the biofeedback system. Once these tests have been carried out, they will of course also appear on the report. So when we go back to the report, there's a bit of time to calculate. Here they are. So these are the different elements we tested. And on the report, it won't display those that are rejected. It will only display those that are good or average with a good evaluation. So here still on a test, you have the percentage of calculation in relation to the scan that was done beforehand, and then the body's unconscious response to what was measured when the information was presented to the body. There are new functions coming soon in the tests, which will be frequency testing and live testing of any information. These will be additional features that will appear here. When you're on the list, you have a keyword search. So for the moment, there aren't many lists, but in principle, there could be hundreds or thousands of lists, because the idea is that you'll be able to edit tests yourself. So when you're on a test that belongs to you, a little pencil appears here, and when you click on the little pencil, you enter test editing mode. I can click on each of the elements, modify the texts, and change the actions. So for the moment, I have the action on Ayurveda and on the organs, but soon we'll have other types of actions appearing here. And so, to modify an action, here you see that it has an action. For example, on Vata and Vita, you click on VPK, and you say that it will increase Vata and Vita, for example. And then in the organs, you say that it will increase amino acids, bladder and blood, that it will decrease, for example, brain and eyes. And with that, you'll have defined what the action of this particular input is. This will then be used for automatic evaluation, since we're going to look for a match based on the level of what we have in people, i.e., their evaluation in the form of the flower, and what it's supposed to do here. And that's what's going to enable us to classify all the elements on this list according to the result. You'll see that at the bottom you have other tools. You can add tools. You can import a list directly. So if you have a list, you can paste items directly with one item per line. You can delete the list if you like. You'll also soon have the option of placing all these elements on a two-dimensional image, so you can simply take a photo or import an image and place them on a logical map. The idea here will be to have the test move around the logic map according to the different elements you've chosen. The general properties of the list are up there, so if you need to modify it, you click here. You say which category it's in, whether it's public or private, and whether it's free or paying. So if you decide to make a paid list, the advantage is that you can then put it in public once it's ready, and all the people will be able to have access to this list and choose to pay for the use of the list, either every time or with a monthly package for limited use. So it's a system that lets you share the knowledge you have or the types of assessments you have and get paid for it. If you ever start on a list that isn't yours, you can duplicate it here. So you see, I can't edit it. I can see the actions, but I can't modify them. On the other hand, if I duplicate it, I'll enter a system where I'll find my own copy, which I'll be able to fully modify this time by adding the title, description, etc. to the list. In the general menu, which you always see on the right here, you'll find my lists. And here, from any screen when you're, for example, here on Home, you can choose to go and edit your lists which are here. You'll then have access to all your lists. If you want to create a new list, you can do it just like that.